Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have Josh, our student, help me out here, and we're gonna show you what the flow or the continuum of a treatment looks like. Old school, conventional PT wise, what you learned in school. I'm gonna put that on the board. And then Josh is gonna step in and show you what he's learned and what it looks like with the 180 system. So see what your differences are. See if what I'm putting on the board looks like it's pretty much what you were taught and what you were doing. And then see how different what Josh puts on the board looks like, okay? So we've got the beginning of your treatment, we've got the end of your treatment, and then we've got it broken down into the components of what you're doing. And we could even say this is an eval. So we'll say this is an eval, okay? So S, subjective, O, objective, T is gonna be your treatment, RA is gonna be your reassessment, PE is patient education, and HEP is gonna be either HEP education or just doing Therex, that part of the treatment, okay? So when you went to PT school, you were probably, and what you're doing now, if you're working in a conventional PT clinic, mill, whatever it is, you're probably told that your subjective is when you have the patient come in, you've reviewed their chart or you're reviewing their chart while they're sitting there and you're asking them questions, okay? So subjective is probably going to last about this long with the conventional PT model, okay? So let's say this is a 35 to 40 minute continuum of time. So your subjective is probably gonna be like 5 to 8 minutes, let's say, okay? So once you get your subjective done, then you're gonna move on to the next thing because PT school taught you to chunk things and go in a sequential order. So we're done with subjective there. Now we're gonna go to objective. So this could be special test, this could be measure range of motion, this could be manual muscle test. Whatever your objective assessment is going to start after you do your subjective. And let's say that's going to last another 5 to 10 minutes, okay? Because this is what's going to lead to your diagnosis. So this is where we're going to get into differential diagnosis and trying to figure out what the diagnosis is because you obviously need to know that because that's what's probably going to dictate your treatment, okay? So after you figured that out, now we're going to get into your treatment and let's say you're going to do 10 minutes of manual therapy, 10 minutes of E-stem, and 10 minutes of something else. So, okay, so you've got somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes of treatment here, which is actually gonna be more like this, okay? Now, reassessment. Do you do a reassessment? So if you did all of this stuff in your objective to get all these measurements and all these tests to come to your diagnosis, are you doing some type of reassessment at the end of the treatment to reassess strength, reassess range of motion, reassess functional ability, anything like that? Or is your reassessment just asking them, how's your pain? So as I said, this is a 35, maybe 40 minute continuum here. Well, you just used 20 to 30 minutes here. Here's another 10 minutes. Here's another 8 minutes. So you're already past 35 minutes. So you probably don't have time to reassess. And if you're following the conventional medical model, the only thing you're really focusing on is pain anyway, right? So reassessment is probably not going to happen, or it's going to be about a minute or two of asking them, how do you feel now? Okay. Then we go to patient education. So we get to the end and now you're going to tell them, okay, well, here's your diagnosis that we came up with over here. Here's why I did the magical machine and the magical cups and the magical tape and all the magical things. That's what we did here. So that's why I did that, because that's going to calm down your symptoms. And then going forward, we're going to do more of that. So there's your patient education. So that might be maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Once again, you're already over time. You don't have time for that. And then your home exercise. So if you're going to give these people a home exercise program, maybe you've learned you shouldn't give people exercises on the first visit because you're supposed to calm their symptoms down, and giving them exercise might increase their symptoms or aggravate things, so you don't even do that. But let's pretend you do give them some home exercise. So you gave them the 5 stretches and the 5 magic exercises according to their diagnosis. You pulled the handout out of the file and gave them that because everybody with that diagnosis has to do the same 5 exercises and 5 stretches. So your home exercise program took you about 5 minutes, okay? So you're way over time here. And that's probably what it looks like, okay? So now Josh is gonna step in and he's gonna write in blue what we're doing with 180 and how different that is than this.
So we'll start with subjective. We'll probably ask maybe four questions to start.
Yep.
So you're doing that subjective first, but subjective kind of goes throughout the treatment. And so as you get the patient on the table, you're going through and asking them questions. And so instead of going 5 to 8 minutes just to begin with, you get more of it. It goes kind of like that. So you're kind of going, as you're going through your objective, your subjective, as you're going through your objective, you're asking questions through your subjective as well. And then once they're on the table, probably here, I'd say, maybe back here, you're going through, or once you're going through the screen and on the table, you're going through your objective. So then you're looking at more, probably, let's say, there. You're looking at the screen, you're looking at NFTs, you're looking at what muscles are inhibited, which muscles are facilitated. And then also through the screen, what's their functional capacity like. So you're doing that kind of throughout the kind of first half, I guess, of the treatment, or of the session. And then throughout, once they're on the table, you're looking at NFTs, and after each NFT, you either palpate or go on to the next muscle. So that involves our treatment, which is probably, say, done with the screen here, start on table here, marker. Going through, so then we've got patients on table, we're treating as we go through NFTs, and then once they're about off the table, we're then going to begin with reassessment, but also kind of exercises in HEP. So we've got reassessment starting once they're off the table, but also you got reassessment throughout NFTs, and so we'll do NFT, say muscle fails, palpate, that's treatment, and then you'll then reassess that muscle. So reassessment really happens throughout, but as far as reassessing the screen, that's once they're off the table. So we can kind of go really as long as the objective is. Kind of reassessment there. Let's go right here actually. So treatment will go all the way throughout the session, because when we get done with them, then we're doing exercise towards the end. HEP kind of goes, actually let's do patient education first. So once they're on the table, we're explaining, and again, assuming this is an eval, we're assuming that the patient kind of doesn't understand the new techniques we do here at 180. And so once they're on the table, you're then showing them through the NFTs and the palpations and explaining that kind of throughout the entire session. So that looks, again, a lot like the whole thing. And then as far as HEP goes, once they're kind of off the table, we looked at which muscles were facilitated, which muscles were inhibited. We'll look at, based on the muscles that were inhibited, which kind of movements and functional exercises can we do to then support and make sure that we've got the muscles to stay facilitated. So we'll do that towards the end, like so. So instead of doing like a linear sort of eval, where you've got subjective, then objective, then treatment, you've got stuff going throughout the session. So you're doing patient education throughout, you're doing subjective stuff throughout, and you're doing objective and treatment measures throughout the session.
Very good. Okay, so now think about what you're doing with your current evaluation treatment plan, what you learned in school, what everybody in your clinic is doing, because you're probably doing the same thing they're doing, and think about how awkward it is to have something chunked and then you go to the next chunk and then you go to the next chunk. So how many times have you sat there and driven yourself crazy trying to get all of the information out of their subjective, and then get over here and you've already forgot about what they said over here, and there should have been a piece of information that you asked over here because something came up while you were evaluating them, and the evaluation, as Josh said, should take the majority of the visit. So why aren't we taught to evaluate and ask questions as we're evaluating, as we're watching them go through the evaluation process? Now notice when Josh was talking about his objective, he didn't talk about manual muscle tests, he didn't talk about special tests, he didn't talk about find a diagnosis, he didn't talk about differential diagnosis, because that's what is going to chunk you into this And then when you get to the end, you're wondering what this had to do with that because you never learned what the important stuff was, okay? So the reason why we want to do this exercise is that you can see that here, we're doing subjective, objective, treatment, reassessment, patient education, all at the same time. So this lets your patient understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, what it feels like when they couldn't do something, what it feels like when they can do something, and now we've got a measuring stick that we use here that we're going to reassess here, and they see everything that happened in between, and it makes sense to the patient. So this, I need to get buy-in from patients. You don't need to get buy-in from patients when you actually do something that's an evaluation and patient education and treatment and reassessment all at the same time, okay? So as you've learned how to go through this process, how easy does this make things as they come up?
Yeah, it makes it to where like I don't feel sort of locked in by I'm doing my subjective at the beginning. I have to get everything in. I have to make sure I don't forget anything. It makes the flow of the whole session a lot better so that, one, you can spend less time asking questions of, like obviously you want to know what happened, mechanisms of injury, but then you can spend less time not working on the patient, and you can spend more time actually working on the patient and asking them questions as you work on them. So it's helpful to know that part, but then also the reassessment with the screen, it's easy to then say, look at the screen, look what happened on the table, let's treat, and then look at the screen after and say, what changed, what can we do more, like functionally wise, what can we do better now? And then how can we support that with exercises?
Okay. And how many times have I gone through an eval and it looked like we were going one direction, but we get halfway through and something pops up and I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder why that happened. So how often when we get to this part, do I ask a question that most people try to ask here, but I ask it here while I'm doing something here that takes our treatment a different direction or makes me think of, oh, I need to check this or I need to check that.
Yeah, well, it depends. Sometimes it'll happen, and it's not like if he had tried that at the beginning of asking all those questions, you'd be like, oh, I'm not sure where like to go next, because he's able to assess each part of, say, like doing like lower extremity, it's all cleared, and then he can ask in the middle like, oh, are you having issues with shoulder or something like that? Then it's able to then like pivot really easily because of the structure of the eval.
Okay. So here is one of the big problems that students have, new grads have, PTs with 10 years of experience have. You were taught to pigeonhole everything here and everything in their subjective and everything that you did in their special tests and all that kind of stuff got you to a diagnosis, and then you treat that diagnosis for the rest of the time. What if you didn't ask the right question here? What if you were wrong in your diagnosis? What if you don't even need a diagnosis? So when I treat a patient, at the end when we do patient education, I don't say, so your diagnosis is patellofemoral syndrome, and that happens because blah, 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 blah. Okay, I don't ever do that, okay? I say, here's the problem. You had pain over here because these muscles over here weren't doing their job. Now that we've got those to work, you can see the difference between the way you squatted when you came in and the way you're squatting now when you leave. Completely different. So this process being organic and it moves with the patient and we can adjust as we go is completely different than a medical model that tells you you have to figure it out now, and then you do all of this time with whatever you came up with here. So if you came up with the wrong thing here, or you had the wrong thought process, or you're going towards the wrong purpose, you cannot win with anything else that you do after that because you've just shut down your total thought process. Okay? So when you try to fight to get to a diagnosis that's usually symptom-driven, pain, swelling, lack of range of motion, instability, all that stuff, you lose from the time you get done there all the way there. That's why patients come in 2 to 3 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks, and you keep on doing the same thing and chasing the same symptoms because you never got to the root cause here and you didn't have an organic process that takes you through the whole system. Okay? So, if we add up time here, you ran out of time. Okay, this is why conventional PTs need an hour. because you're stuck with this time component of chunking. When you add up the time here, so let's say, so you heard Josh say that the subjective is going to last kind of throughout the treatment. So if they're here for a half an hour, subjective is going to last about 20 minutes. Objective, you heard him say, once we get done with asking a quick couple questions, this span of time is all objective assessment, okay? So that's probably another 20 minutes. Then we get to treatment. Well, treatment is on top of that. That's probably another 20 minutes. Then we have reassessment. Well, we're reassessing throughout, so that's 20 minutes here. Plus, we have a 5-minute reassessment at the end, so there's 25 minutes there. Patient education, we're educating them throughout, so there's probably another 25 minutes. Then we have HEP at the end, which could be anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. So conventional PT takes you an hour to get an hour's worth of work done. This, 20, 40, 60, hour and 20, hour and 45, hour and 50, over an hour and 15 minutes. 20, 40, 60. Yeah, so we're creeping up on 2 hours of work that we got done in a half an hour. So you're giving your patient nearly 2 hours of treatment in a half an hour and getting results versus trying to cram a whole bunch of stuff into an hour, which doesn't have any flow and doesn't make any sense. Okay, anything else? Okay, so when you're, and this is what I hear from students and new grads, one of the biggest complaints, they don't understand what to do after they do this. How does subjective and what they figured out in their objective and their special tests and all that stuff, how do you go from that to treatment? Well, if you don't let this lock you in here and here, your treatment spans that whole time, your objective spans that whole time, makes it really easy to have a systematic thought process that you get through. So the more you try to chunk things the way you were taught in school and the way your clinic is probably set up, the faster you will lose. So when you want to learn how to make this a systematic process with checks and balances, so one of the things that Josh talked about is we're going through and we're still doing our assessment as we're doing our treatment. So we're actually checking our work as we go through. Think about how you check your work in the conventional medical model. So if we go back to the treatment here of E-stem and ice or cupping or needling, how are you rechecking to make sure that what you're doing here address that there so they're better there? You're not. When you do this and everything overflows, you're doing that for the entire half an hour. So you can prove this didn't work, this worked. This didn't work, this worked. This is better. These are the exercises. So now your exercises are built off of what you did here versus going to the folder and pulling out the exercise handout that has the 5 stretches and the 5 exercises. Your exercises should be dictated by what you did here. And if what you did here was just chase symptoms and get things to calm down, you have absolutely no clue what to give them for exercises. Okay? So hopefully that made sense. As always, post comments, questions in the section down below, and I can go into further detail on something that may not have made sense here.